22nd of October 1998. Some in the audience might say, you got the wrong date by about 20 years. Well, it's not like that. This date, which could seem a very ordinary day for you and for billions of people in the world, was a very important day for me, since that was the moment when I moved from Italy to India. In reality, I was living in a fantastic city, which is Rome, the eternal city. You would all know Rome. It's beautiful. I had a lot of friends there. I had a girlfriend. I had a good job. My mother was there. My brothers were there. And so why did I decide to come to a completely different world in a new company, in a place that I didn't know, where I didn't have any friend? My best friend there in Rome told me when I broke the news to him, is there something wrong with you? Why would you want to do that? But still, I did decide to come here. So it was not the first time I had come to India, where I'd landed in 1998. In fact, 10 years earlier, I'd gone to the southeast of Asia, and I had first visited the spick and span clean Singapore, and then I had been to the impressive skyscrapers of Kuala Lumpur. And then I decided to stop over in Delhi. And I was there for 2 days. Frankly, the comparison with the previous cities did not impress me that much. But still, I stayed there for 2 days. I visited some sightseeing spots. And while climbing the steps of the plane, going back to Italy, I said, okay, I've been in India now. I don't think I'm going to come back here. And then, of course, the irony of life is such that I had to come back here not only to stay for 2 days, but to stay for initially 2-3 years, and then many, many more. So, back to that October 1998. It was a foggy day when I arrived in Delhi, and the airport of Delhi was not as beautiful and grand as it is today. This was what it looked like. So, low ceiling, a little dark, a little oldish. And then I stepped out, and I realized that in 10 years, not much had changed, frankly. So I was put up in a hotel close to the airport, and I had decided to come a couple of days before joining the company. And so I wanted to relax in the hotel, just get acquainted with the climate, with the country. And I was relaxing in the pool of this hotel when I saw something that was a little bit of a shock to me. I was not really used to seeing monkeys in the city. I used to see them at the zoo, not really going free in the city, let alone the swimming pool of a 5-star hotel. You know, it was a bit strange to me. But then I was joining the company on Monday, and I used to travel through the NH8, which is the highway that goes from Delhi to Jaipur highway. That was the Indian concept of highway. I was coming from Europe. In the first 5 kilometers, it could look like a highway. Later on, it was 2-lane with a lot of beings on that, all kind of beings, not necessarily human, as you can see. And yeah, that again was a little bit of a shock for me. So, first thing that I noticed while being during the first few months in the company, and of course I wanted to understand the country, the culture, the do's and don'ts and the work, was the fact that the communication in my management team was not really ideal. During those days, I had read some Dutch psychologist called Geert Hofstede, and he talked about some cultural dimension on which you can classify the different countries. So the big difference, for instance, between Italy and India was the power distance. Power distance, which is nothing but how a society accept and expect that the power is unequally distributed, So power distance in India is much, much higher than in Italy, 77 versus 50. So that means that hierarchy is extremely strong in India. And that explained to me why I was seeing this not really easy flow of communication, particularly the bottom-up one. And then another interesting difference was also the uncertainty avoidance. What is that? Is how certain societies, some people would try to keep the future under control. So how can we accept the ambiguity of future? In this case, Italy was much higher than India. So that means that basically Indians, they do not worry too much about how uncertain the future could be. And that's why you hear the word adjust in India quite a bit. And that's where the jugaad come from, actually. So, having said that, I tried to do as much as I could in order to get my people to talk to each other, to agree to disagree, to form a team. And then, of course, apart from reinforcing the organization, we worked on the portfolio of products, we worked on the distribution, we work on the communication, not only the internal communication, but also the external communication. That was very key. In fact, one of the big mistakes that normally multinationals do is thinking that product and communication can be exactly the same when they pass from one country to the other, and that they can be equally successful if they work in one country. That's not really the truth. In fact, this is an example here that you could see. This was a competitor who was hiring this advertising, where there were two nice American ladies talking freely and nicely. Then there was this picture of the pH that goes down after you eat. And I mean, it was the typical advertisement that you would say in a marketing manual, but frankly a bit boring. So now we thought that we should be definitely relevant to the country. And that's why we tied up with a very strong creative advertising agency, and we started to be as close to the Indian consumer as possible. And then we came out with some path-breaking advertisement. I don't know if you remember this. You are a bit young to remember that. But this was Center Shock. It was a fantastic success when it was launched. The distributors were cursing us because we didn't give them enough stock at that moment. So what was this? This was this very, very sour gum. And in the advertisement, this guy wanted to have the air in a certain way, and the barber would put this gum in his mouth, and he would start shaking like this. And in the end, he would eventually get the air that he had. And this was very successful. The other one very successful was this other brand. You remember Happydance, so I don't have to tell you anything about this. So, frankly, having done these changes, during the years, the sales had started growing again. In fact, they had come in a moment when the company had degrown by double digit, and little by little, sales started going up again. In fact, they were growing so well that eventually we had the issues of how to increase capacity. And we already had two factories at that moment. We could increase capacity in one of these, or we could do something completely different. That was go to a greenfield and make this greenfield in one of the two states where there were still fiscal incentives. And so we went and recommend this option to our shareholders, who were a bit hesitant at the beginning. So they told us, okay, go back, rework and articulate business plan, come back here. And we did that. After 2 months, we were back there. We said, look, in our opinion, this is the best option. We should go with that. So we got the approval. And in the meantime, the window to obtain this fiscal incentive was closing down, because we only had 12 months in order to find the land, build the factory, start production. But we did it. We caught finally the deadline, and so we inaugurated the factory. And the great thing is that this fiscal incentive were flowing to the bottom line, and we could reuse this to reinvest in advertising, reinvest in distribution, re-engineer our products, and finally, really the sales started taking off like nothing. So in the span of 8 years, we had multiplied into 4 the sales. So it was really a good success story for India. But then what next? So we wanted to do more than that. In fact, we thought that we could replicate this in a country close to India, and Bangladesh seemed to be the right one. However, once again, when we talked about setting up a manufacturing facility in Bangladesh to the shareholders, they were a bit hesitating. We were already exporting in Bangladesh, and there was 100% custom duty between India and Bangladesh. So you understand you can't sell with that kind of custom duty. Prices will be definitely too high to compete. And so we proposed that. They were hesitant. Then once again, we went back to them after 2 months, and we told them, look, we got a solution. There is another multinational who's got a factory which is not fully utilized. So we are going to take a part of that factory and start producing there. Fine, agreed, go ahead. So we went ahead, and once again, we could lower the price of the candies. Sales shot up, and after 3 years, we were able to buy our own land and build and inaugurate our own factory. That was also Bangladesh. And after Bangladesh, we did something similar in Sri Lanka, and then we were given also the opportunity to operate in Russia for a few years. In fact, we were there for 3 years, and once again, the success that helped us turning around the company was the fact of being a very relevant communication, as well as a timely entry in the gum segment that was huge there. And we did it with a brand that was already very strong in the candy, and that worked very well. Once again, what's next? And the group at that moment had the ambition of going to the ultimate business frontier that was Africa. So I moved to Dubai, set up an export company there that would cover Middle East and Africa, and started exploring new countries in Africa to understand where we could build the base to get into the African continent. So we did travel a few countries in the north of Africa and the west of Africa, and eventually, in spite of the fact that once again it was quite a bit of a risk what we were about to propose, we thought that Nigeria would be the right country to establish a manufacturing facility there. But once again, I don't know if you know, but Nigeria is not really a safe country, as a devaluation of the currency that every year goes down by 10%, 20%, whatever it is. And everything is imported there, and so very expensive. So it was a big risk. But in this case, shareholders were very, very prompt to agree with us. And so we did set up a manufacturing facility there, in spite of the fact that the ease of doing business was not really improving. In fact, it went from 120 to 147. It means that Nigeria was the 147 country where it is easy to do business, being Singapore number 1. So these were the countries where we had operated for so many years. I thought it was the right moment to change the industry and go to something that would be that had been my passion for so many years. So I moved to an Italian multinational, in this case in the automotive sector. Here the issue was that their two-wheeler was not doing as well as it should be. This is a very important brand, very known, had been here in India for many times since 1947, but at that moment it was relaunched with a different marketing mix. It was not working very well. So we analyzed the market. We thought that there was no point in trying to go against the big guys like Hero, Honda, and so on, and we thought that the success factor could be just get into an unexplored segment with an affordable price. We thought that that could be the sporty segment, but you know, in India, whenever you go and get a scooter, the first question that one asks is, bike ka mileage kitna hai? So, sporty scooter, would it work, would it not work? But we did something that had a mix of Italian and India. In fact, we did some feature for the scooter that were more suitable to this country, like a bigger seat, have a more fuel-efficient engine, and this was the fastest scooter in the market. So this mixture of Italian style and Indian conception worked very well. In fact, in the first year, the sales of the two-wheeler doubled, the factory utilization went up steeply, and eventually the business was turned around. So after that, I'm now into a different venture, and once again, the challenge starts. Let me try to give some takeaways of these 20 years in emerging markets. So first of all, to work in these markets, one has to definitely be culturally relevant. So, as we had heard earlier, there's no use to try and sell spirits and salami in an Islamic country. Doesn't make sense. Then we definitely need to give something which has a superior quality, but at an affordable price. Does not make sense and will not make so much of money by trying to sell a smartphone at 1.5 lakh where you can find some good one at 20, 30,000 rupees. And last but not least, when you get into one of this country, you need to be there for a number of years. You can't really think that you'll get in, make the buck and get out. It doesn't work like this. You might have seen an article recently published that say that after 20 years, Ford has become profitable this year. Once again, looking back at the decision of 20 years ago, was it the right choice to come here? Definitely was. I saw a lot of countries, I learned a lot of things, I met a lot of interesting people, including my wife, who has given me 2 delightful kids. And on the personal front, I definitely learned also about being persistent, resilient, and when actually I had to walk the wire, and it did happen many times, sometimes with the support of my colleagues, sometimes without that, sometimes with the consent of the shareholders, sometimes with some hesitation from there. The only thing that I thought would work was to work in a sincere and committed way. And it did pay back for me.